Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good whatever, wherever you are in the world watching. We have a fantastic guest today, phenomenal guest, a high-performance mind coach. David Fairweather. So it's a treat today. We've got someone who is vastly experienced in the field of the mind, and it's a great opportunity for us to learn and get an insight into the work that David does. There's phenomenal work with people and helps them to fulfill their potential, and I'm sure he does a lot more than that. So just to introduce David, give us an idea, David, how you got into doing what you do, a high-performance mind coach. People out there watching, wondering, what does a high-performance mind coach do? There's obviously a lot more to that you do, but if you give us an insight in terms of what you do, how you got into what you do, that'd be great.
Okay, well, good to be talking to you, Jimmy. I got into what I do essentially out of personal need, which I think is a really good thing for someone that works in coaching or therapy to do, to have an experience that you need to help yourself with, and then to learn from that. Fundamentally, I was a very high-performing engineer in a previous existence, decade or more ago, and I was kind of top of my field, really requested. I was a hired gun. I worked in consulting, and I made this error where I kind of sacrificed my own happiness and satisfaction for the earning of money. And I essentially put that really necessary part of me, the spiritual part, the physical part that had wants and needs. And I just got lost in a project that broke me. I was, as a type A personality, I'm now a recovering type A personality. I was excessively giving hours or selling hours and losing myself in the process. And I kind of ignored some early warning signs from myself, even decades before that, letting me know that I wasn't particularly happy doing what I was doing. I got migraines and some other somatic symptoms that I just put to one side and kind of thought, well, these are all physical. This isn't telling me anything. It just means I need glasses or I need to lie down. But those symptoms came back in full force when I was in the midst of the darkest period of my working life, really just chained to a cubicle and not seeing the sunlight. I sacrificed a summer and so much more than that. I ended up developing tendonitis, carpal tunnel, bursitis, crippling neck pain, headaches. I was physically and spiritually miserable. And of course, I couldn't quit my job. So I forged ahead for another year or so in absolute agony. And every day working at the computer was like a kettle of boiling water had been poured onto my scalding forearms. And I just gritted my teeth and struggled through that. I did eventually tap out and then kind of drifted in the wilderness for a while, really stuck in my injuries and really having a hard time finding someone that could help me out of that. And my super pleasant family doctor at the time informed me that I'd better get used to it because I was going to have that pain for the rest of my life. And I thought, well, I think I'm going to change doctors. Got a second opinion, and I started learning all about chronic pain and what was happening in my body, because I'd conditioned responses to the idea of moving a mouse, the idea of moving a keyboard, the idea of being in my desk. I spatially anchored that terrible feeling in the seat of my office. So having removed myself, I went on a search for someone that could help me. And I stumbled across the work of Dr. John Sarno. He's was a New York back pain specialist. And he kind of believed that just because you had an x-ray that showed some kind of anomaly in the spine, that it didn't necessarily mean that that was the cause of the pain. And he'd found that out by x-raying people with no pain, but still had anomalies. So he was very into a psychodynamic approach where he used a psychiatrist to work with his patients, and it was really mind over matter. That was really useful for me to kind of go into my history, my baggage, and start to get in touch with all the things that had stored up in me that really needed to come out. Emotional things. As an engineer, we were really taught to live from the neck up, and you don't have a body, you don't need to go to the toilet, it's just think. And I was learning to bring my body back in and listen to the messages, because I think what had really happened was I'd ignored myself for so long that the messages came really loudly from my body to make sure that I couldn't ignore them.
When you say somatic pain, David, the somatic pain, what sort of pain manifested with yourself? I mean, pain being a warning signal, for want of a better word. What are some of the aches and pains that you have? I mean, you mentioned the carpal tunnel, and you mentioned the other things as well. Was there anything specific that was sort of knocking on the door, so to speak, and trying to get through and let you know?
Well, I think that they were a symphony of pains, and they kind of created the composition in totality together. It wasn't one specific little voice that was trying to speak out. I think from Sarno's standpoint, people will have an issue that is the symptom, but the symptom communicates the problem. And the problem was being communicated in so many different avenues because I wasn't listening. So actually, to answer your question, I think it was just conflict inside me, inside probably a left and right hemisphere, that was creating tension that was manifesting in headaches. Okay. And so the headaches were the communication of my conflict. And because I ignored that, then I'm sure that they cross-communicated down into my arms and my neck, and that tension started to communicate everywhere else. And as you know, it's really difficult for a conscious mind to get into the deep unconscious part of someone where they really exist. So I found a hypnotist that could help me with Sarno's methodology and help me improve that. But like any good type A, I thought, well, I can do better than that. So I decided to certify myself as a hypnotherapist and develop my own scripts, which I fed back to myself and I would listen to nightly. And I started to have really good benefits from doing that work. I also kind of raced out, as a type A would do, to join a meditation group in a Buddhist temple. And over the course of about 6 months, I became certified as a meditation instructor. I'd always meditated since a child, but I'd meditate to music, or I would meditate to very specific things. And this taught me the discipline of using my own mind without listening to a CD or some other external thing to help me kind of gain control of me and develop some element of mind power. And of course, something in me was awoken by that spoke to the boy that I had been, an artist, someone quite sensitive. I dismissed all of that in going into engineering. I wanted to be an artist, but in post-Thatcher's England, it was really difficult to imagine getting to be anything but a starving artist. So I became a lucrative engineer, and that really wasn't me. But I learned a lot about processes, and that really results-driven engineering work that is all, it's not anecdotal. There is evidence of a test working or not working. And so I kind of bring those parts together in this work. And to answer your question about high-performance mind, I think the pinnacle on this, over and above the training I took with Hans Sellier's last postdoctoral student, I've been training in consciousness training for a few years now, really inspired by the work of Anna Wise, who actually produced a book, The High Performance Mind.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I've been through, and this is a Bible for me in this work. She utilizes biofeedback. And I'd kind of been exposed to biofeedback a little bit in my treatments physically, but this was biofeedback of brain waves. And it really spoke to the hypnotic structures that I'd learned about how you get someone into a deep state to be able to work with them, and how I'd guided myself into a deep state. She broke these down into structures. She's unfortunately, she died in 2010, but her last apprentice, Judith Pennington, became a mentor to me, and I like to bring in that science and technology of feedback and diagnostics, a coaching realm where I'm supported by this hypnotic knowledge and this therapeutic knowledge. Because the other thing I didn't mention in my journey, being a type A, of course, I signed up for a psychotherapy school for 4 years and dived into thousands of client hours, hundreds of hours of personal supervision, and everything else to become what I am today, which is a registered psychotherapist and licensed mental health professional in Canada. And that for me is the full suite of learning, at least to this point, because we both love lifelong learning. So I'm going to add more to this, but it really creates a suite of tools in my palette where I could blend science and art together and then really be fulfilled as a human being. So my body doesn't need to speak to me anymore unless I'm being a bit of an arse to myself and ignoring my body or not seeing my body in a way that honors my body. So now any reoccurrence of those signals, I hear differently. I hear as a caution to pay attention to me. And I think I've been blessed through the whole process. As painful and as expensive as it was, I wouldn't change any of it.
Yeah, it's taking us to where you are, for sure. And what I find fascinating is the journey that's taking us to where you are, and certainly the engineer and the process involved in being an engineer, the empirical science that goes with that, and so on and so forth. But what's quite fascinating is the Buddhist side of it too, because I think that quieting the mind is a challenge for most people. Certainly myself has been a journey as well, in terms of having the ability to just quieten the mind as much as possible. And how did you find it at first? Because I'm sure there's people watching thinking, okay, that sounds fantastic. They stop and quieten the mind. And these days we've got so much out there in the way of mindfulness and so on and so forth. That was probably some people, they may even struggle for a minute just to cut themselves off from any distraction. And technology these days too, David, technology is a big part of it, I think, where years ago we didn't have technology like we have now. And technology is great in many ways, but it also serves as a distraction for people. They just gratification, they're always on their phone, always on their social media, and they struggle for that. How did you find as a type A person to go into a Buddhist center and start to work on your mind and that stillness of thought?
Horrific. It was horrific, but and it really was. I mean, it dived us in at doing an hour of meditation every single day without fail. If we didn't turn up, we failed the course. So that disciplined part of me, I put to good use. I mean, I needed to be top of the class. And so I wasn't going to be that guy that moved around and jingled the change in his pocket to irritate the other 20, 30 people in the class who had their eyes closed and were trying to drift away from the shared reality. I would spend time in walking, moving meditation, just trying to get from one step to the next step without having a thought. And I challenged myself to do that in the same kind of way that I bring a lot of stories and metaphors into the clinical work that I do with people. And I was just having fun a couple of days ago, anchoring a state of self-ridicule into an obsessive person by letting them know about the game, step on a crack, break your mother's back. And if you've ever played that game, it's ridiculous. No backs get broken in the process, but if you really put yourself into the reality of believing that that's what will happen, and you have to be careful. And you create a hypersensitized attention to not veering out of the boundaries. And I use that same kind of mindset in not talking in between steps. That if I were to let myself enter random thinking, that would have some significant impact to me. So I'd increase the importance that I don't think.
That's really interesting stuff. And I think that, I mean, you're obviously serious about the approach and want to get as much as you can out of it, which is obviously important. And many years ago, when I started learning some of the concepts of Buddhism and would check in and learn and speak to people, and I'd find the entrepreneurs in there, David, who they'd meditate on the basis that they could generate more ideas for their business and so on and so forth. Well, it's kind of defining the purpose. We're here to switch off, and they'd be like forcing themselves to think of new ideas and generation. I thought, well, I'm sure there's a time for creativity, which no doubt you do as well, and I've listened to the audio, which is great. Yeah, in saying that, they'd go in there and it almost like defy the purpose of being there. That basically they were looking at these big breakthroughs entrepreneurially, and I'm like, well, what they're there for is their call, and it's not my job to tell them what they should and shouldn't do. But I thought, well, if you're going to go there, then go there with the intention to learn and get as much as you can from the healing point of view. Because we live in a world, I think, the world we live in today is quite a noisy world in more ways than one. I think that there's so much going on, and we've got our primal brain. And from an evolution point of view, we're kind of in this world, I think, where certainly in the corporate sector, where there's so much noise coming through the channels, where they're getting up in the morning, people, and constantly bombarded by algorithms and constantly bombarded by so many different things that are hitting them from everywhere, really. There's not that time to decompress. There's no decompression, really. And I think that you had the insight to be aware of your aches and pains and somatic symptoms, where a lot of people, they kind of just drift through and just think, okay, well, I'll go to the doctor, get this pill, or get this tablet. I'm not medical qualified. I'm not going to comment on what people do in that regard. I'm sure medical people have got, you know, their place, and they do a great job. They do a wonderful job. Yet, I think for me, from a psychological point of view, this is an area that it quite surprised me that it's not as, I wouldn't say acceptable, it's not widely available as other things might be. Say, after Christmas time, you can guarantee there'll be millions of people around the world joining a gym and finding a personal trainer, and that's fine, you know, and there'll be people out there who have a fractured ankle, a sprained ankle, or fall off their bike, and they'll go into A&E, and that's fine. Yet when a mind is concerned, it's like, well, we don't really want to go there, or at least they don't really understand what and how it works, really. Could you tell us, give us an idea of what a day in the life for yourself is around helping people and working with people? What are some of the people that come to see you, and what do they see you for? What's their perception of what you do, and how do they perceive what you do? And what are some of the issues they come to you with and the outcomes that they want?
Okay. Well, before I venture into that, I just want to touch on a point that you made about those business meditators, because I kind of learned that there are essentially two different types of meditation. And one is a kind of storing of energy, a mind power building meditation. I believe it's samadhi. And then there's vipassana, which is an insight meditation. And I kind of put those in the same category as learning scales on a new instrument and playing the instrument.
Yeah.
But as a musician, you know, there's a big difference between enjoying something and practicing something that's hard, that makes you stretch your capacity.
Yes, of course.
And they were playing, but they hadn't a real capacity that had been stretched. So for the first year or three of my meditations, I really focused on holding my mind on no thought, which builds the muscle of your concentration, your ability to hold your attention.
Yeah.
When you can do that, then you can direct your mind to do some really interesting things, healing, you know, receiving insights, cosmic consciousness, whatever you're going to do with your mind. But there has to be at least a functional amount of capacity to hold your concentration. Otherwise, it's just a monkey mind. And probably a monkey mind playing with the idea. It probably was to some degree, but if they'd have spent some time learning how to not let their thoughts go anywhere, then that would have made them far more impactful in wherever they directed their strong mind. And so an important thing for me on a daily basis is to practice keeping my mind attentive to something. So I generally, I look after myself. I need to exercise and eat well. I've got to listen to my body, and I need to meditate. And when I meditate, I set my mind in a place where I'm not going to be thinking about my lunch when I'm working with a client. I'm completely absorbed in their reality, and they're telling me about their problem, their circumstances, what they want. Generally, people come to see me for issues related around stress, around anxiety, around habits, and clearly depression also. And I kind of see stress is the cost of living, and anxiety and depression are the quality of living. And you've got your habits, which is what you habitually do. It's like your car dealer telling you, well, you can have all the features, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. So there is a cost to whatever comfort you're trying to establish in life, being confident instead of anxious, being happy instead of sad, you know, elated instead of being depressed. People come to me to change their state. They're stuck in a state and they don't have the capacity to change it at will. They are stuck in anxiety. And of course, I have a great saying that there are always at least two sides to everything in a three-dimensional universe. So when someone says to me, well, I can't be happy, I know they also can be happy.
Of course. Yeah.
If they're stuck on the reality of that they can't be happy, they are looking two-dimensionally at a three-dimensional life. And so my job is to help them get out of what they're stuck on focusing. They just do it by accident without even really holding their mind there. They just go off into terrible thinking. And I have to bring them into a place where they can actually point their attention to something that's more useful. The good of life instead of the bad of life. And to help them understand that really everything that they do, whether they're jumping out of a plane and enjoying it or being absolutely terrified of it, there's a cost to that. Now, if you love jumping out of a plane, you'll pay a high price for that because you love it.
Yes.
But if you don't, then it costs too much. You know, if it costs anything, it costs too much. And there's always a cost to absolutely everything. There's a cost to being absorbed in your work. There's a cost to being not absorbed in your work. There's a cost to being happy. There's a cost to being sad. Life has a price. Everything in it contributes to that price and how you kind of deplete yourself to the point where there's nothing left and, you know, you've died, you've expired, life's ended for you. If you are a battery full of energy, when the energy's gone, the battery's dead. And so how you spend that energy, whether it's by, you know, powering up a radio controlled car that keeps just bashing into a wall endlessly until eventually it dies, or do you use it to go somewhere and do something really interesting and fun? I'm helping people who are stuck in one direction to just reverse and go in another direction or change the way that they address what it is that they're bashing their head up against.
And say the client comes to you with anxiety. They've got anxiety. They might have social anxiety, they might have general anxiety or specific anxiety. So you work with them. Beyond that, where do they go from there? Do you a scale of how to measure the functionality? Is the way of quantifying the anxiety coming down? Is it feedback? And how long after they've seen you, does the anxiety reduce? Do you give them work to do as well after they've seen you and stuff they can carry on doing too?
Right. I tend to think that our subjective experience of our life is the deciding factor into whether or not we're enjoying what we do or not. But it's not really a way of measuring if someone's life is worthwhile or if it's fulfilling, if they're satisfied by it. So really their anecdotal responses let you know if they've got what they're looking for. I do have the capacity with the mind mirror that I utilize to see their brain waves. So I can see if they're in kind of really high frequency gamma and low gamma and high beta frantic thinking, or whether they're really calm. So if someone were anxious about a spider, for example, saying the word spider to someone spider phobic or arachnophobic, as it would technically be called, but I like to use spider phobic. If you said the word spider to them, well, then they'd freak out. They're not going to be like, oh yeah, spider, because they're scared of the spider. Oh, the idea you have a spider, they're going to freak out. So their physiology is going to change. They're going to go from being rested to being aroused. They're going to go from being safe to not safe. They're going to be vigilant. They're going to be tense. Their mind's going to be frantic. Yeah. So you can read that response in galvanic skin response. You can read it in their blood pressure volume. You can read it in their physiology, their skin temperature. And by correlating those things to the way that their brain waves are firing off, you can kind of see, okay, so that aroused things actually pleasure, or that aroused things actually pain. Checking in with the client to find out, because again, no one thing you can ever be sure of, because there's two possible things to every one thing. Always two sides of a coin.
No, definitely. Yeah.
Is it
I find the feedback machine really fascinating. I think that's something that I'd like to talk a little bit more about. And the reason I find it fascinating is because, as you all know, there's different types of resistance with clients, and some clients can be resistant in one way, some in another way. Some clients can be resistant by just complying, and how do you feel? I feel great, because I don't want to disappoint the coach and the therapist. And I find that he's even more resistant than the one who doesn't like the coach or therapist. Say, well, that's not working for me, or maybe for whatever reason they've seen 30 therapists, never worked before, and they are resistant, or maybe they don't understand very well what therapy is, and they're resistant anyway. They've got a perception of what they think it might be. But the kind that I find that can be challenging as well, if we don't sort of attentive to it, is the one who is resistant in the sense, well, you get the rapport, they buy into what you do, and they may have had family friends who've come to see you, or even colleagues from work, and it's worked really, really well, and they kind of sort of go along with it. And I think that there are ways and means to measure it, and I think that's fantastic. And I had an experience once, to give you sort of an insight, when I was doing some consultancy work. I won't mention what I was doing, but it was for the Air Force, and I've done some work for them. And then there was one of the guys who's quite senior in the Air Force. I wouldn't say he was resistant, yet all things said and done, they have a way of doing things, I have a way of doing things, and so on and so forth. So he had a limited understanding to what I was doing, and some of the stuff I was teaching the staff in various capacities. And he had this limited perception of what it was all about. And I think he waited for a specific situation to challenge me. And basically what he said, it was a group of 20 people I'm training. I'd been there before, and they knew of me, and I'd gone in again. He blatantly come out and said, well, all this mind stuff is a load of bollocks. And I thought, well, what do I do to that? So I thought, I took a moment to process that and connect with his map of the world. I took the mirror out of my face, so to speak, and saw the world through his eyes, and thought, okay. So I said, I'll tell you what we'll do. And some of the work was on relaxation, on releasing cortisol from the system, and decompressing. I said, well, what we'll do, if you'd like to come out to the front, I'll do a 15-minute visualization, whatever you want to call it. We'll run with whatever you feel comfortable calling it. And I use visualization because he was aware of the work I did in sport too. So I said, oh, this one stuff I do with some of the athletes anyway, going to come up. And what I did beforehand, I did a blood pressure reading of where he was, and I did an oxygen reading too, and heart rate reading. I'm not medically qualified, I'm also in sports science too. And his heart rate, his blood pressure was maybe 145 over 90 odd, which is above the range in the UK, from what I understand. And the heart rate was quite high as well, in the 90s. And probably because his blood was boiling from some of the stuff I was teaching the group. And I did and oxygen was probably at 92. So I did the facilitation, and by the end of it, I put the heart rate on, and he'd come down considerably. His blood pressure was something like 130 over 80, and his heart rate was down significantly too, probably about, say, 70 odd. And at that point, it didn't quite register in his mind the significance of that. Even then, I said, well, let's put it this way. If your heart rate was reduced by 20 BPM in the space of a day, that's about 10, 20,000 beats less stress on your heart. And he goes, well, will it stay that way? I said, well, it's like anything really. It can go up, it can go down, who knows? It's all relative. But what you could do is do it again. So a bit like pain relief patients who say, well, it stay that way. Well, it's a bit like taking the tablet for pain. How long will it last? It's anybody's guess. You do it again, and so on and so forth, one would think. And for me, it was one way of doing a behavioral experiment, to say, here you go, there you go. You could call it science behind it, but inconclusive evidence that here you go. And the final thing that I suggested him to do is, I said, if you want to run to the end of the room and back, and I'm going to ask you a question. And he did that. He ran to the room and back. I asked him a question. His heart was about 100. And I said, decompress. We'll do 5 minutes visualization. And I'm going to ask you a similar question and see what your reaction's like and your thought process is like. And he said, and that was the final convincer for him to realize, well, actually, lower heart rate, lower blood pressure, more clear. And that's what I was getting at the staff. And I find it fascinating that, you know, what you do, because you've got this feedback, and the feedback, I think, is fascinating, because I think there's so much scope for that in corporation sport too. I mean, I personally love to see where athletes are from the point of view in that zone, and how you can tap into that. I think that the mileage in that is phenomenal. You can sort of tap into where the athlete is when they're on top form, or the musician when they're on top form, and then find a way to get there, or anchor it, or facilitate that. Then the excellence that you're creating is phenomenal. Now, some athletes do it naturally through their own experience, for their own perfect storm. It's subconscious. I don't even know what they're doing themselves. They just get there for whatever reason. You know how you do it. Imagine how much you can improve, and that's fascinating. So, if you could just share a little bit more about the equipment you've got, if you don't mind, David, how it works and how.
Okay, so I have a couple of YouTube videos that show me interviewing Judith about that on my website. Maybe if you kind of note that at some point, David Fairweather. And my YouTube channel is under my name too. The equipment's changed a lot over the last number of years. One really interesting fact that I just want to share with you, just because it's fun, and I don't know that I believe in coincidence. Turns out the guy that is the software developer for this mind mirror now left British Aerospace in England the year before I began there. And it's a small town, Stevenage, in England. We both work for the same company, and we have both gravitated towards finding Judith and the equipment. It's a very simple box. It's about the size of a calculator, with a few sensors that I'm able to connect to my skull, and a few other sensors that I can use for temperature, or GSR, BVP, that connect to my fingertips. And in real time, I'm able to watch on a breakdown on the computer screen the varying speeds of brainwaves in cycles per second in hertz.
Wow.
And actually see the movement. So when I first got the equipment, I kind of connected it all up to my head, just, you know, occipital lobe, temporal lobe, and grounding on my forehead. And I'm kind of held together by a sweatband. And then I started to think, okay, let's do mathematics. And I just watched the left side of my brain light up, and the other side went dim.
Wow.
And that was fun. And then I thought, okay, well, what would a purple zebra look like? And I started to go off into that realm, and the other side shut down, the right side flared up, and I got to see how the hemispheres of my brain can be very dominated by certain kind of neural activity. So I saw the dominance in my hemispheres, and it fascinated me to get those two hemispheres to work. So the interface is something that continues to progress. I've helped Steve a little with some ideas about some things that would be really cool. Steve's the developer. Really cool in the software, if it could do this, if it could do that. And he's continually developing this with Judith. At the moment, it is a very affordable, it's a slightly complicated, not so consumer-friendly device that they're trying to get in a headband or something that doesn't need you to have, you know, the knowledge of where on the brain, where on the skull to connect things.
Okay.
But after reading their really time-consuming and very detailed description of how to apply it, I then, without knowing, put myself through a year and a half of daily training and practice with it. And I ended up finding the maximum number of sessions that you could record. Steve didn't think anyone would do that much. And so I found the maximum number, and I also streamlined the process. So I've gotten the art of putting the electrodes onto my forehead, the sensors, down to about 3 minutes. And Judith still finds that amazing that someone could put that stuff on in 3 minutes. Because when I go to train with her, she's like, oh, well, we could do a meditation before lunch, but that's a hassle. And Judith, 3 minutes. She's like, oh yeah, I forgot, let's do that. And boom, 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 I put the stuff on. I do it by feel, and I've just got used to where it goes. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No, it's really interesting stuff, and I think that technology, we've got to embrace it. We've got the resources now, and I think that certainly the field of coaching, the field of therapy has come a long way in the last 10, 15 years. Going to really come a long way as we move forward. And I think we're only just scratching the surface from a technological point of view. Whereas in the past, our studies were limiting. Certainly, empirical evidence-based studies, there were limitations in validity and reliability. These days, we can screen, we can do a lot more. We can do things that we couldn't have dreamed of doing in years gone by, MRI scanning, and there's so many things that we can do. We've got computer databases, we can test millions of people if we really wanted to, and I think the accuracy and validity is going to get a lot better. What I find fascinating about the machine, and it's the whole approach, that's the whole holistic approach, where a lot of people who claim to be holistic are actually quite reductionist, where they just use one method. What I like about what you do, and when we spoke in Arizona on the program we were on, was there's holism there. You're uncovering every stone, and I spoke to many people who've gone the bracket of being holistic, but they're even more reductionist than, say, the person they claim to be reductionist, the medical person, because they're just using one thing. Mm-hmm. I spoke to a guy once who worked with the principles of shaman and chakras, and he wouldn't entertain anything else. And I thought, well, actually, not really holistic, because you're only singing on one hymn sheet and not considering the big picture. The person you could be working with, it could be many things contributing to the way they feel. It could be what you say, but of course there'll be many other things as well, as the perfect storm being the way it is. And I think that technology, is fascinating, because it's the way forward. And I think in the corporate setting these days, the issues on anxiety, the two big ones generally are the anxiety, depression. They're the two big ones. Not suggesting we're going to a corporation and work on depression. Your role plays to help people, because you're a therapist and registered if they want that, if you desire to do that. Because I think people are people wherever they go, no matter what environment you're in, to have that ability, if not take the patient on, maybe refer them if that's necessary. So you can do performance. There is that fine line, I think, between performance and therapy and treatment, clinical, really. But I find, for me, and the reason why I find the machine fascinating, because many years ago when I first started working in the corporate sector, one of the challenges I had, David, was I went to that environment, and me being a bit of a corporate hippie and so on and so forth, when I first started working in corporation, it was like, well, I'm like, what do you want to improve? I know about the mind to a certain extent, as much as I know, I knew at the time, and I've learned a lot since, and will continue learning a lot. And they gave me these targets. It's like, well, here you go. We want to improve these. If you can improve these, then you're doing a great job. I said, well, what are these targets? These are about 15 years ago, or probably a little bit more than that. And I looked at them, and we'll call KPIs, key performance indicators. I didn't know what they were at the time, and I didn't want to say I didn't know. So I said, I'll take them home to see what they're all about. So I read them extensively and looked at them, and I thought, okay, I worked in sport for a long time. I've been a therapist for many years, coach. What can I do to help them? I thought, well, what I find ironic here, they're all external attribution. They're all factors that are, or the people have limited control from an effect point of view, directly, and I found that they're putting more pressure, more anxiety on the staff, because they have these everywhere, and they're marginalizing success in the back of these. And I thought, well, these are important. It's a bit like football. You've got the league table. It's one way of measuring our performance. Yet if we focus on the referee, we focus on the weather, we focus on the other team, we've got limited or no control on that. We need to focus on ourselves, internal attribution. So I thought, well, you know what? The following day I said to the guy, I said, dude, these KPIs are useful. I think that they're a good measuring tool to a point. Product's important as well, and market's important, but that's another story for another day. I said, what's more significant for me is what I'm going to call the HPI. Now, you probably will find it on Google. I made it up on the spot. That's a human performance indicator. I said, if you've got staff coming into work who are enthusiastic, motivated, confident, are grateful for their customers, and they're on a scale of 1 to 10 to marginalize it at 9 out of 10, with 10 being high, and they can maintain that for 80% of the time, then the KPIs will cover themselves. You'll smash it. And we'll find ways to create experiences for the staff to be more focused, to be more confident, to be more enthusiastic. We'll find experiential ways to do that, because what they were doing to a point was very didactic. People coming in, performance coach, bang, bang, bang. And that's only going to get you so far, one would think. And for a lot of them as well, tell me something I don't know anyway. They know they're underperforming. So I brought in all the experiential methods, and we smashed it. big time. And that was my entry into the world of corporation. I wrote a book at the back of that and so on and so forth. And I find the stuff that you do can, with the technology, can move it beyond that. You can go even further forward. You can get an open-minded environment. And I find that the organizers that are open-minded are the ones who do well. It's the ones who are shut off to possibility, who are the ones who are going to stay where they are or get left behind, because the vitality of the business isn't there. And it's the forward-thinking people who are the ones who bring people in, like yourself, and to help people. Because I think that if you're in a good place yourself mentally, and you've got your game head on, you're going to give it a good go, you know. And can, you know, what are your thoughts on that side of things, in terms of how you can integrate this sort of equipment and the stuff that you do and the experience you've got on every level to go in there and revolutionize organization, really, in that sense?
Well, I've kind of broken the protocols into a little bit more of a scientific approach. I like that. I'm not going to say that that's going to touch the souls of everyone that I approach, but I like protocol and process, but I'm really happy to wing it. Just before I go into that a little more, I just want to touch back on, I think you said you were working with the Air Force or something.
Yeah.
Mine was a load of bollocks. And I find that really funny, because we're talking about a part of society that shines their boots and has shiny buttons for a very specific psychological purpose. It was found in, I think, I don't know if it was World War II, I'm just going to guess, I'm not really good at this, but the one subject I got really bad marks at school. But there was something about that soldiers performed better when they shaved and when they were smart, and that told the opposing forces, the other armies, something about the individuals they were facing, that if you were slovenly and you had bad posture, it made a difference to your success. And so being clean shaven, being smartly suited and booted is a psychological thing, as is the idea of having different ranks, because as you're aware, everyone on this planet is an equal human being, and that those are egoic psychological ideas that are given to people or stolen by people, and that when we see a policeman, we respect them, or we fear them, or we hate them, or whatever we do based on their anchored suit or their representation. And that's purely psychological, because having a flashing light on your car doesn't actually make you more intimidating, unless the people that are around you have been conditioned to believe so. It's purely psychological.
From a social psychological point of view, no, definitely, very much so. And
now, if I asked you to change your temperature by 2 degrees consciously, you'd have a really hard time with that. But if I asked you to imagine that your body was really cold, or that your body was really warm, and to visualize around you in the theater of your mind a fireplace or an iceberg, your body's going to respond to your unconscious mind's ability to project images on the theater of your mind in visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, or gustatory realms. Like you've got 5 sensory surround in the theater of your mind. You sensualize, you use all of your 5 senses in your mind, and you can use them outside. You can smell mint, or you can imagine you're smelling mint. You can see a person, or you can imagine you're seeing a person. We use that same structure internally and externally. And to kind of switch off the internal part and say, well, it's all external, that's nonsense, because every night you dream in 5 sensory surround, using all of those senses to the point where you vividly believe it's reality. And so it is reality until you wake up, and then you have a different reality. But in that reality, if you're being chased by a dinosaur on a skateboard on Venus, then it's real, and you are terrified. And you run away, and you wake up in a cold sweat, because your body has responded to your thoughts. So we don't have to prove that using your mind has an impact to your physical body, your chemistry, your state of being. We know it does.
Of course, definitely. It's just, you know, for sure. And the kind of example is when someone's got an exam, and they've got an exam and they've got to go for a wee, for example, whatever reason, and the mind-body link is there. It's obviously there, and so on and so forth. And what was really interesting when some of the videos you got on YouTube, the ones where you go out and do the stuff that you do, I think that it takes a lot of courage to do that, and it certainly builds an awareness. That's for sure. I think that it's amazing, and how that works, and the people listening to the conversation or watching the conversation probably I'm sure we're talking about it. If you just want to mention some of the stuff that you did, you went to the streets of, was it Toronto? Was that beach that you went to? I'm sure it was. Yeah, it was quite fascinating. The feet stuck on the floor and.
Yeah, I took a friend or two out, and we attended a couple of different festivals, a youth festival and a jazz festival. And while everyone else was offering to peddle their wares, we were just walking up to people asking them if they knew anything about hypnosis and if they wanted to have an experience of that. And people were really interested. And it wasn't really entertainment. We weren't on stage. We didn't have a big audience. It wasn't egoic entertainment. I didn't do it to just entertain myself. I went out there to not be doing therapy with people and to just give people experiences that could be shared with the viewing public, so that they could see that it wasn't, you know, if it wasn't set up and it was a real person doing it to real strangers, that then they could believe what was happening. So we wanted to demonstrate phenomena like someone being able to forget the number 3 or their own name, to have a catalepsy, to have their hands stuck to their head and not be able to get it off, or to be able to change someone's sense of themselves so that they could have a completely different name. We hit all the 4 realms of experience that can be impacted by the imagination, and that's your movement, your physiology, your senses, and what you do or don't see, do or don't hear. You know, people can read a book and you can call their name and they don't hear, because selectively they've switched off the external senses. They're fully into the reality of their book. And we also wanted to demonstrate emotional responses, that you could get someone to laugh or cry or something like that. I have an issue with getting someone to cry. That seems an unpleasant thing to inflict upon someone, even if you're going to take that away a few minutes later. But we hit the kind of emotive, motor, cognitive, and sensory quadrants of human existence to show that they could be manipulated by words, that a person could, using words, get someone to imagine something so vividly that it became reality. And how that works, we don't really have to go into, because, you know, there's hundreds of scientists all arguing about how that works. But it is engaging someone's mind in the same way that when they're dreaming, that's real. I think they kind of entered a sleepwalking state of some kind where they were functional, but what was being said to them became real. So we wanted to demonstrate that in a way that would be at least fun and entertaining, but also be informative and respectful. And so we had fun doing it. I don't know that everyone likes it. Some people have been really enthusiastic about that and have come to see me because I'm demonstrating that I understand how to open someone's mind and how to get them to conjure up a different reality, whether that's that their old reality is they're anxious and the new one is that they're confident, or whether it's the reality that they're scared of dogs, but now they're not, or that they can't talk to strangers, or now they can. As soon as you demonstrate that you can help people modify those aspects by using the imagination rather than the conscious mind, then it highlights the power that people's unconscious mind has, and its ability to project images into this sensory theater that then pretty much create reality. And not in a way that lasts forever necessarily. I think any good hypnotist could walk up to someone and get them to believe that their shoe is a phone, but I don't think that they're going to remember, that they're going to believe that for the rest of their life. Too much bumping into other realities are going to change their mind about that. When people laugh at them that they're talking to a shoe, or that when they can't actually order theatre tickets using their shoe, that's going to break down. So there was no therapy that was being done that day. It was just a brief moment, an interlude into someone's life, and just showing the possibilities, but the possibilities being that you can alter the way that someone thinks and feels, and that if you do it in the right way, that then can lead to changes ongoingly. I mean, if you took someone that was afraid of kittens and you got them to believe they're not afraid of kittens and they actually quite like kittens, and then you present a kitten to them and they play with that kitten and actually like it, well then now they've got possibilities and options. They've had an experience that defies their mortal fear.
Yeah.
When you do that, things can change. You know, like the firewalk for Tony Robbins. Once someone's found out that they can do what they believed they couldn't do, all the possibilities in the world open up.
Yeah, and that's really interesting stuff. And what I find fascinating is that, you know, people, in terms of change and why, what are your thoughts on change, Dave? What are your thoughts on change? Why do people find it difficult to change? What are your thoughts in terms of how they get themselves in a situation where they might have a fear of a spider or a snake, or crossing the road, or going to a store? They might have a social phobia. They may have anxiety around going into a store or an office at work or whatever. Now, logically, they know the answers. It's like the traditional weight loss clients. They know what to eat. There's enough information out there. The client I had recently, we talked about the nutritional aspect of it. He knew what to eat, just like a lot of people who go to these classes that focus on the food itself. They know what to eat, but generally you wonder, if they know what to eat, if they know the answers, and the answers are apparent, they're out there, then why is it hard for them to change? What are your thoughts on
to the left-right conflict that we were talking about at the beginning? That if someone's left analytical brain knows what they should eat, but their right emotional brain doesn't feel like eating it, then they're not going to. You know I should stop smoking, but I want a cigarette. There is a conflict there that shows up hemispherically in EEG, that, you know, if someone's really congruent, you can see the congruency. And if they're incongruent, you'll see a change from left to right in the brain, in the way that the brain works. And so touching on, I think, your previous question, because I can see in the mind mirror conscious attention, and I can see sensory awareness, and I can see lower than that kind of subconscious understanding, and then deep delta being below those theta waves. I've broken the training down into kind of attention, awareness, and action steps. People need to be able to stop interfering consciously and to be able to imagine something in order to change their belief that is lower in the chain, in the brainwave chain, about that. All these people that you just described that are scared of going in stores or scared of spiders are completely closed off to the idea that going into a store is okay, that spiders are actually quite cute or interesting. They're closed to that. And their stress response fires off when you suggest those things. Oh, go and talk to a spider. Ah! Like their stress response fires off. So their stress response creates adrenaline releases in their body, and whatever other neurotransmitters, whatever chemical brainwash is going on, that does not allow them to open up their neurology to an alternate reality. They're stuck and closed. And so by learning to reduce your conscious activity, your beta wave activity, and to be in your sensory field where it's all alpha, and to be able to get into the deep theta understanding of that, means someone can go in to have an experience where they can transform the experience in theta. But generally people talk so much they're not aware of the sensory bridge that allows them to get into the lower parts of their brainwave activity, and so they can't make the transformations happen. So I think in terms of kind of relaxation first, imagination second, and then transformation third. Unless you're relaxed, unless you're able to imagine the alternate side of that coin, then no transformation is going to be possible. So stepping into a brainwave state that is more open and more reminiscent of early learning, where when we're born, we're primarily a delta state. Brainwaves speed up, and at a certain point, our brain functions so quickly, there's so much conscious noise that you can't hear subtle, quiet, intuitive voices trying to get through that noise. So you have to shut the noise down first. And then if you can use your senses in the theater of your mind to access symbolism in the way that we use when we dream, then you can allow your unconscious to send you symbols and understandings that appear in the theater that you can then go, oh, wow. And then you can know a new thing. But you have to have collapsed beta. It has to be inward, looking at everything else, not seeking outside and not chattering to itself. It has to be observant. And without the beta brainwaves, when you come out of your silent moment, you're going to have no memory whatsoever of what happened, because you're back into the realm of talking and understanding using words. But if you haven't been using your words and you've just been using your senses, then you're going to have no memory of that. Mm. So when someone learns to meditate, they learn to shut off their conscious mind and to just be and to just sense. But when they open their eyes, normally they have very little understanding of what happened, because they weren't able to control their beta waves to be able to be aware of what's happening, to be able to talk about it when they open their eyes. Mm. So I work with the brain waves, but not necessarily always with the machine. I'm just understanding that you can't really get through to someone that's talking so much that you can't get in.
Of course, yeah.
You have to not be talking in their head first and not be arguing about what you're saying to be able to sense something else. Like if you learned a shoe's called a shoe, and then I try to convince you it's not a shoe, you're going to be, what are you talking about? Of course it's a shoe, I know it's a shoe. But if I go, wait, watch, look, and your thoughts shut down, and I go, see this on here, and you see a microphone, and your senses like, oh, wow. And I go, see, it's a listening device, it's not a shoe. And your curiosity to sense that will enable you to change the reality of what that's called. Or if it's an explosive device, you know, incendiary device, and it blows up, you're going to be shocked into realizing, oh my God, that wasn't a shoe, that was a bomb. So you're either going to need to shock someone, which no one's going to want you to do. They're very protected against shock. So you have to use curiosity and wonderment to get in. And those aren't elements of beta wave conscious thinking. Those are elements of delta and theta and alpha, childlike states of learning, where they're just sitting in an absorbing state, finding out what things are. You can convince a child that anything is anything.
Of course.
I remember convincing a friend of mine's little brother that this battery I had at the back of a watch was a listening device, that we'd actually bugged his room and some other stuff. And he was petrified of that. Because he didn't have the wherewithal to argue. He just, was just vulnerable to believing things. And I don't think people want to be vulnerable to believing just something that people say. So I think we're quite protected, quite scared of finding out that what we believe is not.
No, it's really interesting. And I think that's it's quite fascinating, because I found that certainly in my experience in corporation and in sport to a certain extent, where it sort of echoes a lot of the sentiments that you talked about there in terms of the way they go about solving some of the issues they've got. And, you know, certainly from the point of view, for example, I touched on the weight issue, where when people join these weight loss as they call them, groups, for want of a better word, and they do everything, and the thing is, really, it's like, well, they're kind of reinforcing the issue in more ways than one. They're looking to solve it logically, and the person's already beat themselves up for about 20 years as it is anyway, and then they're going back into the firing line again. And that's quite similar to a point where it all starts with a concept in business. The buzzword the last 10 years or so has been emotional intelligence, and now it's mindfulness, now it's one thing or the other. And there's some value in that, and I enjoy it. Some great work, some great people I've met along the way, and some phenomenal work, that's for sure. But I think a lot of things, they kind of sort of find their way into the environment, and people make their own association to what it is and how to use it. And we always tend to find that the counterintuitive process of using the experience, being creative, because we're so used to being in an academic system that's a million years old, that needs revolutionizing, they tend to like sit down again and try and solve the issues in a logical way. And you think, well, if you'd have worked it out, you'd have worked it out by now. And there's some of these issues I think that they face, and certainly from what I've seen in that environment, where it's a bit like the weight group, where they're logically putting the points out and what you can eat, and if you these many calories, this much weight, and it's all very, very logical to a certain extent. The math is easy: exercise more, eat less, and more nutritional food, you're underway. Same in business. You know, the math is pretty easy to a certain extent, and process is obviously really important to have a process, but the process generally is centered around that left brain, that step 1, step 2 type thing, and it's just over and over again, the same cycle, the same issues, and you can go in, you know, year in, year out, same thing really. And what's really refreshing is you know methods that you can use, and like you saw, you can sort of merge everything together and roll things all into one, and then you've got a better chance of succeeding. At least I think if you can go in there and create the experience, look at things creatively, get the brain firing again, get that wonderful tool that we've got, you know, working again on all cylinders really. And what's really interesting, and when you drew attention to earlier, isn't it fascinating when you think that you've got someone in certain positions, like I mentioned before, the Air Force, or even in corporations. I've got some people who bring them into football clubs, 1 or 2 managers who let me get on with what I do, but they can be dismissive too, to a certain extent. As long as they get the results, I don't care. They'll call it anything around. One manager calls it voodoo, and he calls it what he wants, it works. But the irony is, it's like, well, they use a mobile phone, they use a computer, they fly in planes, and where do they come from? Mm-hmm. It's fascinating to think, well, they've got no issues using all that, and that's what's created. And that's the big irony in it all, and they don't realize the infinite possibility that the mind can have. And one of the things I find is that I don't think we spend nearly enough time studying people who get better, get healthier, who are creative. We tend to be paralyzed by analysis, and certainly certain people who practice certain therapies spend 20 years convincing the person they've got this ailment, whatever it is that they've read in a book from 300 million years ago. And then when they've done that, it's like they're analyzing, and you think, well, there's got to be a point where you sort of decide to put an underline on things, and we move forward now into a brighter future, whichever that future is, and whatever the person wants to achieve, and whatever state they want to feel, which is key. But it's been fascinating. We're sort of going over time, and if people are okay to get in touch with you, David, if they want to get in touch with you, you've got some contact details you can share.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm just in the process of setting up something that's far more corporately flavored, the highperformingmind.com. But currently, that's not a populated site. I'm still working with my current website, davidfairweather.ca. So there is places on there that people can get in contact with me. Therapy at davidfairweather.ca if they're looking to do some work with me. They can contact me about coaching, executive coaching. I have a talk that I'm promoting at the moment called Staying on the Good Side of Burnout. It's essentially my story. It's helping people become high performers and protect themselves to be able to continue doing that. So they can look into my Facebook page, welcome some invites on there if people want to come in and be part of that. If they want to get through to me through my website, and of course my YouTube channel. I currently have several thousand people that are subscribed to that channel, and I'm always looking to release videos that are useful, helpful, like the ones that you were kind enough to experience. So they can find me on YouTube. Just type in David Fairweather, anxiety, therapy, coaching, something like that. I'll be in the top of those searches in some way, shape or form. And I'd be glad to hear from anyone, answer some questions, or bring someone into my Skype coaching or even to my therapy room if needed.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I'm sure that people watching and people who do watch will get a lot of value out of something you covered. And it's been fascinating. It's gone really fast, time distortion. It's been fascinating insight into what you do. And I'm sure obviously there's a lot more you do. And having had the pleasure of meeting you over in Arizona and having a facilitation as well, being a million miles an hour person myself, and having experienced the relaxation session that you did with me during the class, it was phenomenal, and the breathing, and it really is useful. And I think that anyone watching, I certainly would recommend they get in touch. I can see how and the value of what you do and the impact it will make in the corporate world. It's a new corporate world. We're in a new world, so to speak. We have different challenges that we used to have in years gone by, and it's a whole different dimension. It's a whole new reality, really, from a business point of view. And I think that we've got to embrace the mind in more ways than one and move things forward. So it's been a pleasure, David. No doubt we'll catch up again and keep in touch. We've seen the States anyway, but no doubt we'll speak before then and get you back on again on the show again. So thanks again, David. It's been a pleasure having you on board, and till next time, thanks again.
Thanks so much, Pete. It's been a pleasure hanging out, Jimmy.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.